We are on page 111 in the Kuzari, and we just finished discussing the pedigree from Adam HaRishon until Avraham Avinu and his children, about who had the Inyan Ha'Elohi, the divine spirit inside of them, generation after generation. Do you remember the question that got us started to this whole piece?
Just talking about something about the
Chet HaEgel, very good. Well, on page 105, the Kuzari said, "Be careful, Rabbi, don't say too many good things about your people. I heard that in the middle of this whole story of leaving Egypt, they actually built a golden calf."
Yeah.
To which the rabbi said, it wasn't such a big deal. And on page 106, the king pushes him, "No, but answer my question. Idol worship is a big deal in the Jewish religion." And the rabbi again says, "Bear with me until I explain everything." And so the king resurfaces at this point on page 111. Amar Kuzari, says the Kuzari, "Zot bemet hi hagdula hanimshechet me'adam." I really believe that their greatness came from Adam, the first man. Ve'adam haya gadol shebebriot haaretz. Adam was the greatest of all the creatures in the world. V'nitchayva lachem hagdula al kol hanimtzeim ba'aretz. And that your nation was worthy of achieving greatness more than anyone else in the world. I agree with you. I agree about Noach. I agree about all these things. He says, but my question is, ayeh hagdula azot min hachatat azot. After the sin of the egel, of the golden calf, how do you expect me to believe that the Jewish people are still the chosen people? This is essentially the question that Christians ask us, but many years later, and for something we didn't really find a big deal doing.
But he did say a while back, the rabbi, that the Jewish people were the only people that ever received prophecy as a whole nation, not just like one person here, one person there, and that does make you a different kind of a nation.
Very good. So he said that happened at Mount Sinai.
Right.
Now we're talking about after the golden calf. I said, I believe you. I believe the Torah was given. I believe that, but you guys blew your chance.
Well, clearly Hashem didn't agree with him. Hashem still
How
do we know that? This is his question. Or not how do we know, because we know. The rest of the Torah, we see that Hashem chose us. The question that he's asking is, explain it to me logically. Explain to me how you can make that statement. Everyone here was surprised when we said the golden calf wasn't such a big deal. He said, explain to me logically how do you expect me to believe the golden calf wasn't such a big deal? What if I told you that somebody, some great rabbi today built an idol and he prays to it every day in his house? Yeah, but it's not a big deal. What do you mean it's not a big deal? It's the biggest problem of all times. I had a story here in San Diego. In one of the Reform Sunday schools, there was a Jewish teacher. And she was allowed to come on board to teach. And actually wasn't Reformed, they were conservative, Kehillat. And she was allowed to come on board to teach with an Orthodox curriculum. At the time, they didn't have a rabbi, so it was like in between rabbis, the school needed a teacher, and no. She came on board, she was teaching, and everything was going fine and dandy until one day came the time of Megillat Esther. And the teacher said, we read in the Megillah, that Mordechai didn't bow down to Haman. And one of the kids said, why not? He said, because we are Jews, we don't worship idols. And the teacher got fired over the statement.
What?
Why? I'll tell you a story. That son was the child of a Jewish guy who married somebody from the Far East, who had converted to Judaism, and she gets aliyot to the Torah, whatever they do in this community. And she worships idols in the house in the morning. The boy said that every day before they're allowed to have breakfast, in the living room there are 8 or 9 idols, and they have to put food or incense or whatever they do inside of the plate in front of every idol. So how can you say that my mother is not a good Jew?
She's not.
And this interim staff at the temple was so angry that the teacher could say such a thing. How could you put down the mother's a member of great standing of our sisterhood committee? Who knows what it was? And they fired the teacher here in San Diego. So you say, well, this is crazy.
Yes, this is crazy.
Forgive me for comparing. The king is telling Rabbi Yonatan Halevy, the Jewish people worship idols, not privately, not out of some yitzhak. They took an idol in front of the whole world and worshipped it. And Rabbi Yonatan says, it's not such a big deal. It's a crazy thing to say. So, let's see the answer. And the truth is that, whereas normally I would read a paragraph and explain, and read a paragraph and explain, and read a paragraph and explain, it's not the right way to do this section, because I'm afraid that if we stop in the middle, we'll believe things that are not true.
It's a little different from the episode with this mother who was said she converted to Judaism. But you can't convert to Judaism if you're still worshiping idols. I mean, the two are not compatible. So I mean, like,
didn't the Jewish people convert?
Yes, and then there was this one big episode which was obviously very awful. But there was one big episode, and then it was done. And you're taking it from a people that just left 200 odd years of being in an idol worshipping country, and they are 40 days in the desert, and then I mean,
by the way,
they're just people.
It was not done. It was not in one incident. Until the Kuzari time, most of the kings of Israel
We're idol worshippers.
were idol worshippers.
No, so but the point is the same. We keep deflecting back to our original state of idol worshippers.
Okay.
Avraham Avinu tried to take us away from this, and in Egypt we really fell hard on this one. We don't have a guarantee that our forefathers didn't worship idols. In Egypt, who knows what they did? There are a few things they did that saved them. Believing in Hashem was, hopefully some of them did. I can't tell you about everybody. And I think that the king's question is better than the rabbi's answer. And that's why the rabbi comes again to try to explain himself. And the rabbi has a very wise answer. It's not the answer that you might be expecting, but it's a wise answer. And in order to understand this answer, I cannot stop in the middle, so we're just going to read until the end of this section together. But there's a problem. And the problem is as follows. The rabbi's answer will taunt and take away, will really discredit much of what is Orthodox Jewish practice today. And we have to be careful when we read it, because I don't want anyone to walk out of here losing their emunah. It's because of things like this that we say Shema Yisrael at the end of every class. Amar Rechaver. The rabbi said, Ki haumot kulam bezman hahu hayu ovdim tzurot. In those days, everybody worshipped idols. V'lo hayu הפילוסופים מביאים מופת על הייחוד ועל האלוהות. לא היו עומדים מבלי צורה שמכוונים אליה ואומרים להמונם כי הצורה הזאת ידבק בעניין אלוהי וכי היא מיוחדת בדבר מופלא נוכרי. Even if the philosophers were able to prove that there's no such thing, that there's one God and that there's not an idol, they still would not have relinquished their images. This is because they would focus their attentions upon the image and would profess to the masses that divinity attaches itself to the image and that it is unique in some supernatural way. ומהם מי שמייחס זה אל האלוהים, כאשר אנחנו עושים היום, במקומות המכובדים אצלנו, some would attribute this uniqueness directly to Hashem. We do something like this today, says the Kuzari, when we treat certain places with special reverence. עד שאנחנו מתברכים בהם ובעפרם ואבניהם. We will even consider the soil and rocks of these places as sources of blessing. No one's ever been to the Kotel before? Never come to the Bet Knesset, the place we treat with reverence, the land of Israel? He brings down in the footnotes here that Rabbi Abba kissed the stones of Akko, Rabbi Chia Bar Gamda rolled himself in its dirt. Meaning there's this idea that even the land, the earth of Israel is holy. Yeah, very good. Tehillim says, Tehillim, yeah.
I think it's Kehillat. I think it's...
Haftarah? Okay, it could be Nevi'im.
No, wasn't it like Shalom Shabbat?
No, but it's Shalom Shabbat, they got it from somewhere. If you put the words in your phone, you'll find maybe in Tehillim, I think. Don't hold me to it. ומהם מי שמייחס אותו אל רוחניות כוכב מן הכוכבים, או חייל מן החיילים, או מערכת מזל וזולת זה. Said others would attribute the image's supernatural qualities to a certain star, planet, constellation, or the like. Meaning, so some of them were more honest. They would say, listen, we believe in this idol because Hashem gives it power, and we need this in between to have something to focus on, something to connect to. But really, they still believed in Hashem. And while you might consider that idol worship, that was perhaps better than someone saying, well, this idol gets its strength from the moon. What is the moon? The moon is just another thing in the world. ולא היו מסכימים ההמון על תורה אחת, אלא בצורה מורגשת שמכוונים אליה.
רבי זכריה אלצהרי, בתימן, 116.
Yeah, but the words...
Go ahead.
Okay. ולא היו מסכימים המון, the people would not have accepted any religious teaching or doctrine upon themselves if there was not some image that was the central part of that worship. Everywhere they went, this part of what you expect. You expect that there will be something that you worship. Now, it goes even further. והיו מבני ישראל מצפים למה שיעד אותם משה שהוריד להם עניין מת האלוהים שיראו אותו ויקבילוהו כאשר היו מקבילים עמוד הענן ועמוד האש בצאתם ממצרים. It says during this period in history Israel was waiting for that which Moshe had promised to bring down from them from Hashem, something that they could see and focus upon, just as they had focused upon the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire when they left Egypt. אשר היו מביטים אליו, they would gaze at it, ומקבילים ומגדלים אותו ומשתחווים נכחו לאלוהים. They would exalt them by bowing down to Hashem's presence in front of the pillars. והיו עומדים בני ישראל משתחווים נכחו לאלוהים. They behaved the same way with the pillar of cloud that descended upon Moshe when Hashem spoke to him. Okay, we're going to some shady territory. We read the Torah every week. We read these stories. Oh, okay, so they bowed here, they prayed there. But have you ever stopped for a moment to wonder how similar to Avodah Zarah that looks like? How similar to some kind of idol worship it looks like? Okay, so Hashem's out. Okay, so this was a divinity. Fine, I'm giving you that these were holy things. But even that, attributing holiness to something which is physical, would that not be a breach in believing in one Hashem that has no physicality?
Well, we believe the Torah is holy.
Well, very good. That's the exact next thing. Very good. Marlene, it's a good point. I think that might even be a problem. Not a problem, or it's for a reason. Watch. You can, yeah?
We say that these are the words of Hashem, so it's material, but it's so closely related to Hashem that you have to give it kavod.
So let's hear. וכאשר שמעו העם דברי עשרת, it's very good. כאשר שמעו העם דברי עשרת הדברים, ועלה משה אל ההר להוריד להם מלאכות כתובים. When I first read this piece, I couldn't believe what he was saying. Stefan, you came with it on your own. This is it's intense. The nation heard the Ten Commandments, and Moshe ascended the mountain to bring the engraved tablets and place them in an ark. ולעשות להם ארון, להיות להם דבר שנראה שיכוונו נגדו, שבו יהיו הברית האלוהים והבריאה הריבונית, רוצה לומר הלוחות זולת מה שדבק בארון מהענן והכבוד, ומה שנראה בעבורו מהמופתים. The objective was to have some tangible item that they could focus upon, something that would contain a record of the covenant between Hashem and Israel. This is obviously referring not to the ark itself, but to the Torah inside of it. And a divine new creation, namely the tablets themselves. Additionally, there was a cloud of divine glory that hovered above the ark, and the ark was continually associated with miracles. And you'll see in the first Beit HaMikdash, where we had this cloud above the ark, you find many more miracles. And in the second Beit HaMikdash, it pretty much felt like a building, but not something that was miraculous. Many of the miracles that happened in the first Beit HaMikdash never repeated themselves again. A famous one is the red string on Yom Kippurim that will turn white miraculously every Yom Kippur. In the Beit HaMikdash, the red string was there and nothing happened to it for the second Beit HaMikdash. We were aware that there were no miracles like in the first temple.
So just with the red string, it shows that Hashem, His presence is not tangible, but in a certain way,
in a tangible form. This is very good. So we're getting closer to this point. ונשארו העם מצפים לרדת משה והם על עניינם לא שינו תאורם ועדיים ובגדיהם. Very interesting. I'll tell you why I'm saying very interesting. We say there are three things that Jewish people were saved because of. לא שינו את שמם, they didn't change their name, לשונם, their language, ומלבושם, and their clothing. The problem is there's no source for this teaching. No, there are many places that it says the Jewish people didn't do this, they didn't do that, but more than three things. And every time you have a list of three things, they're not those three. There are two of them or one of them, but not all three of them together. You don't find anywhere in rabbinic literature three of them together.
What does it say in the Torah?
No, the Torah doesn't. It's a midrash. The Torah doesn't mention this explicitly. I found Chacham Ovadia when he brings it down. Even he doesn't bring a source. So he says they didn't change their language, their clothing, but he doesn't bring a source. And it's very rare for Chacham Ovadia not to bring a source or something. Because if he couldn't find it, then I don't know where we were going to find it. Here, again, you find a list, but he doesn't say, says they didn't change their appearance, their jewelry and their clothes.
Jewelry.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is an interesting, I guess there was a Jewish way of jewelry. Now, it could be if you look in the original Arabic, you'll find that even these are translations of something. I don't know. But it's very interesting to me. Okay, so again, you find three things, but not necessarily the three that we always quote. Asher amdu bahem yom ma'amad har Sinai. The people patiently waited for Moshe to descend from the mountain, and they retained their holy status all this time. They did not change their appearance, their jewelry, or their clothes from their first day at Mount Sinai. Ach nisharu bitchunatam mamtinim leMoshe uvoshesh mehem 40 yom, vehu lo lakach tzeda v'lo nifrad mehem ela al menat sheyashuv liyomo. This is very interesting. Moshe delayed, they were waiting for Moshe delayed. Moshe tarried for 40 days without having taken any provisions with him. And we had first left them to ascend the mountain, it was with the understanding that he would return that very day. And therefore assumed that he was dead. Now this is very different than what some Mefashim say, that it was 40 days, but they miscalculated the 40 days. Very simply, according to the Kuzari, and there could be other commentaries that say something similar, Moshe didn't promise them 40 days. He went and he ended up staying 40 days. And then the question on them is, so what happened on day 40 that they decided all of a sudden now to worship a golden calf? That's a good question. But Moshe promised to come back right away, and he did not come back right away. Az gavra hamachshava. It was then that an evil thought overtook. It overtook a small minority of the nation. What do I mean, small minority? Do you know the numbers? How many people worship the golden calf?
3,000, right?
There's 3,000 out of 600,000. Now, obviously, we're talking about men, so I'm sure there were other people who were involved in the story, children, and whoever else was over there. But essentially, it's not.
Why does it say that only the tribe of Levi did it?
It could be very good. I was thinking about this when I was preparing the class. It says that the Leviim, they didn't do it. It could be that the tribe of Levi as a whole didn't participate. Meaning every other tribe had a few of their guys getting involved. But Levi was the only tribe that nobody got involved.
Okay,
it could
they
be.
Had like few from each.
From every tribe that made up this 3,000, but this is a theory. I don't know that I'm right. It's just what I was thinking. I had the same question. And we always think we're so special, the Leviim, like we're the ones that didn't do it, but it's not necessarily true. והתחילו המון העם להחלק מחלקות ומרבים העצות והמחשבות עד שנצטרכו מהם אנשים לבקש נאבד מורגש יכוונו נגדו כשאר האומות מבלי שיחששו באלוהות מוציאם ממצרים אבל שיהיה מונח להם להגביל אליו. It seems they keep using this word כשיספרו נפלאות אלוהים כאשר עשו הפלישתים בארון. This minority was fighting among themselves and proposing various ideas and courses of action until finally a group of them banded together to make a tangible object of worship. Now those of you who know the Midrashim here, there's a lot of wild stories that go around this discussion. Something upon which they were able to focus, just like all the other nations did. So again, they're trying to imitate what they knew to be idol worship. Everyone has an idol. Where's our idol? Where's our God? Where's our thing to worship? Their intent was not to deny the Hashem who took them out of Egypt. Rather, it was to have something in front of them upon which they could concentrate when recounting Hashem's wonders. This is what the Pilishtim did. Now, there's different versions here in the original Arabic, but we'll use his translation. When they captured the ark from Israel and declared that Hashem was present. וכאשר אנחנו עושים בשמיים, ובכל דבר שאנחנו יודעים שתנועתו אמנם היא בחפץ אלוהים, ובלי מקרה ולא רצון אדם ולא טבע. We do the same thing. When we ascribe divinity to the skies. What do you mean skies? It's not just when I say, Al-Hanan, where's Hashem? And he points up. Right? It's not just that. What am I going to tell him? Down? That's what the world does. But I make sure, by the way, whenever I tell Al-Hanan, where's Hashem? He points up. I say, and a little bit inside of you. Maybe we'll get him into the Kabbalistic concept of Tzimtzum before he's 3. That's the hope. But the truth is that we say Yirat Shamayim, fear of heaven. Avinu Sheba Shamayim, our Father who is in heaven. We attribute certain words that become synonymous with Hashem.
It's almost like a poetic way of saying it. We don't really mean it literally.
Do we really not?
We really don't. We're saying it. I mean, we don't really even know what heaven is. We don't even know where it is, but we know it's something that's way beyond us.
Rabbi Aaron had his class this week. And he said a very interesting story. He said when the first Russian astronaut went up to space, they reached out to him and said, "What do you see?" And he says, "I don't see God." And the truth is, like, what was he expecting to see? Maybe his whole life they thought God was up there. And if only we could go there to see God, then I could prove to you that God exists. Now, we might laugh as Jews at this concept, but I can imagine that most people in the world who say they believe in God, in their mind, they really believe that there's a God somewhere out there running around in chariots, lightning bolts. I don't know what exactly they believe, but it's not the pure oneness of Hashem that we believe, that Hashem is not up there, He's not down here, He's everywhere but nowhere. This concept is very tricky, and it's really why we say that we don't believe in God. Because if God is a man up in the sky, then He's not our God. Now we get repulsed at the thought of man in the sky. Hashem, who said He's even a man? We say ha-hi-hi. I have to use the tense, but it's not even true. We say all kinds of things that we're using, we're borrowing terms. So I'll agree with you that Shamayim, we borrow that Hashem is there. But even that idea of giving some kind of sanctity to the heavens over the earth, which you find a lot in Jewish literature, then it begs the question of, are we really any different? What is Rabbi Yonatan Halevy trying to do overall? He's trying to do a few things. The first, there's no order.
He's trying to rationalize what happened.
How is he rationalizing?
By saying, look, it's expected, look at the context.
Oh, very good. He's talking context here. Look at history. Let's look at there's a word for it, anthropological understanding of this whole story. You have to know who the Jews were, where they were coming from, what world they were living in. You're talking from a point of today, but then it was a different planet. Okay, what else is he doing? What's with all this comparison to what we do today? Why is he doing that part?
He's trying to make it look like they're people who would be like today.
Okay, so he's trying to find common ground with us today. Now, I would argue that with the king, he's trying to show him king. Just like there are certain concepts that you would believe in, that you've never second-guessed before, this to them was very natural. There was nothing wrong with having a calf that you prayed to. It really wasn't the end of the world. Just like for you, it's not so hard to use the word heaven and to think of Hashem. He's trying to find common ground with the king. On top of that, I think he's offering things to us as Jews that we kind of judge our forefathers pretty harshly when it comes to the golden calf. And he's saying, but you do similar things. That maybe one day the world will reach an even further level of connection to Hashem, and they'll laugh at the things that we do. Could be, I don't know. He's trying to go down this road. Their sin, therefore, was making an image, but not any image. Asher nesar alehem. This is the kind of image that Hashem forbade them. We mentioned the other week an image that they were allowed to create.
Really?
Yeah. They created an idol that was always with us.
What?
The Kuvim.
Very good, the Kuvim.
Oh,
The cherubs and the temple. We mentioned, how could he, on one hand, the golden calf, no, but this, yes?
Yeah.
Pretty much the answer Rabbi Yonatan gave us, there were a few answers he gave. But the one answer that we have is, Hashem said so. You're right, we cannot build an idol. Hashem told us not to. But when Hashem intervenes and says, this is what I want inside of the Beit HaMikdash, what are you going to tell him? No? It's an image that normally would be forbidden unless Hashem had warranted it. And here Hashem warranted it. Where he's saying here, Hashem didn't warrant this image.
But he also didn't say you have to worship those keruvim.
You're right. We didn't worship them, but we took many signs from them.
Did they get the Ten Commandments already?
At this point in time, they had not gotten the Ten Commandments.
So,
It's almost like a given, though, that we would know better than to be idol worshippers. This is Hashem took us out. We're not talking here about another God.
why?
You're asking, by the way, a famous question. There's a rabbi called the Maharal Nach. I believe he's one of the early Rishonim. I don't know if he's Sephardic, Ashkenazi. I don't know much about him. And he was asked the question, how could the generation of the flood in the times of Noah be punished for all these things? Adultery, idolatry. There was no Torah. What is, stealing? What was wrong with stealing? What was wrong with being with someone else's wife? What was wrong with that? If there's no Torah. This obviously goes back to a famous argument.
Meaning there are some laws that are universal, like even before the Torah.
Why are they universal? What makes them?
Because
I agree. You're right. The question is why.
This is social laws. It's like you're hurting someone else. Like
Right, it's like a common sense you should have. Like, taking someone else's wife, hurting someone else's family. So these are things that are, you don't have an excuse. You don't have to have someone come and tell you. When he tells you, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to find it out. The same thing. Nobody had to come and tell you on Har Sinai not to take somebody else's wife.
It sounds like it's just common decency. It's seichel. It's basics of morality.
Very good.
But it's true. It is. But the thing is that when you don't really have religion in a country or in a place, everything becomes very relative. You don't really have these basics, and then
Sure.
stealing
And then
is
things fall
okay,
apart.
adultery is okay, and
Of course.
that's okay.
Of course.
So
But the Maharanach does argue that they had it within their means to realize that this was not allowed, and they chose not to. And that they didn't have to have a Torah in order to be punished.
but it was only a small minority. So obviously.
Here, I'm talking about the generation of Noach.
Oh.
That's what I'm talking about. Now, there's a similar concept. I was sitting once on an airplane next to the director of the OU. Not the kasher part of the OU, but the outreach part of the OU. And he told me, it was a very interesting flight actually. He told me that, and I know this from experience, but it was interesting from him. He sees it on a much bigger picture than I would ever see. The hardest kids at risk to deal with are those who come from Orthodox upbringings.
Wow.
Because what happens is, a kid grows up in a non-observant world. You don't rape, you don't steal, you don't do drugs, you don't do alcohol. I say, okay, you see, they're in trouble. They're running away from home. They want to rebel against their parents. They do drugs, they do alcohol. They know what's wrong. There's certain things that are built into their mentality that I'm a problematic person. When someone comes from an insular Hasidic community, my wife and I were talking about a community.
they're burnt. They're disappointed. They're disillusioned.
Well, it's not just, I would argue, there are disillusions. They're angry. They're perhaps more angry. Maybe the other kids go away from anger too. I'm going to tell you, there's a community in Haifa, Vizhnitz. They have rules there that it's not tznius to wear white shoes.
Men or women?
Woman. Can't wear white shoes. It's like one of their rules. You can't wear white. Now, you might think like this, what does that have to do with tzniut? They decided, and a girl who wears white shoes gets thrown out of school. In the Satmar community, they have rules like boys are not allowed to ride bikes.
What?
Yeah, it's not right that boys should do sports. Girls, forget about it. So what do you have? And that might not be Satmar. In Yerushalayim, the Yerushalmis, they don't let their kids do sports or ride bikes or nothing. I have a nephew. He's an incredible drummer. His parents got him a drum set, and he got a letter from school that it's a non-Jewish thing to play drums. So he's not allowed to play drums. Now, when you hear these kind of things, they sound crazy. When a girl goes to Beis Yaakov, they're wearing nail polish is the same thing as, walking in the street without clothes on. In her head, there's no difference between the two. They're both not allowed. And so the moment she decides to throw away her religion, she doesn't just throw away the nail polish and riding the bikes. She throws away stealing, shoplifting, whatever in the world can be. I'm leaving the bigger avirot for your imagination. Whatever it is, there's nothing you can't do anymore. I met such a boy. The Kalev Rebbe sent me such a boy. And I sat with him. He was not even 20 years old. Millions of dollars in his bank account. He got himself involved in some not kosher businesses, made himself a lot of money. And he told me, he says, Rabbi, there's not one avirah in the Torah that I didn't do.
Oh gosh.
He was proud of it. There's not one. He has a checklist. This kind of person, he doesn't know between objective morality and subjective morality, that there's some morality that you don't need the Torah. I once told this to a kid, I saw a drop out of yeshiva. I said, there are many goyim that are good people, that are professionals, they have families, they have an education, they do chesed, they do tzedakah, all kinds of nice people, good people. Why in your mind, I want to be like a goy, that means I have to be living in the streets in Manhattan, going to nightclubs? Why in your head, there's no normal lifestyle outside of the Jewish lifestyle? Because he was taught, his whole life he was taught, outside of our community it's crazy, outside of our community it's evil. And then that's what a person turns into when they decide to leave such a community. It's sad, it's the truth, but it's sad. Now, how did we get to this topic?
You're
talking about how we're expected to be like the people back then who received.
Right, and I'm trying to think how
How could they have done this. How could they worship us? We're talking about that.
And the golden calf.
He was
morality.
40 days, and
I'm going to try to remember what it is that reminded me of this. Okay, well,
You came to
they were commanded to do something that they weren't allowed to do. I'm sorry that I couldn't connect it back. ויש להם התנצלות במה שקדם מהמחלוקת on page 115. Their defense is that this all arose out of a mass confusion. ביניהם, ולא הגיעו עובדה ו3,000 איש מכלל 600,000 שהיו, and says, furthermore, the number of sinners was only 3,000 out of 600,000. And the Torah must say it. If you look in Shemot, in Lamed Bet Chafchet, it should be there.
So the Torah mentions 3,000.
Maybe we'll pull out a
It's
Chumash.
something almost new. Like they don't
It says here.
put like it's like if you read the Torah like a child, you think it's the whole people.
The whole people, right? That's why. Let me look it up.
Levi.
Let's look it up. Maybe I could ask for. Yeah, maybe I could ask for a Chumash. Thank you.
Need to have a better picture. Huh?
So we see the Yeridat Adorot. My grandfather, he never had to open up a Chumash to know a pasuk. It's an incredible tragedy.
And it's not here.
Yeah, but when I used to speak in his synagogue, it was the Yemenite synagogue, small place. This is big compared to a synagogue. He would say, "I'd like to welcome my grandson, the rabbi so and so, the only rabbi I know who doesn't know Tanakh by heart." That's what he was.
That's typical Yemenite.
It's a classic Yemenite. Okay, it says here in the pasuk. V'yasu bnei Levi kedvar Moshe. I guess Moshe is telling the Leviim what to do. V'yipol min ha'am b'yom hahu k'3,000 ish. And that day, about 3,000 men fell that day. That was died. I mean, the people who died were those who were involved in the Chet HaEgel. And so 3,000. We know there were 600,000. And so we're learning out from this pasuk. I mean, he's learning from here that 3,000 people died. Let me just finish this section. I don't want to leave you here without finishing this piece because I'm afraid. Is it okay with you if I read it in English just so we can have... Okay. The defense of their leaders who assisted in the construction of the golden calf is that their intent was purely to expose the sinners from among the believers in order to execute the sinners who worshipped it. This is incredible. Rav Saadia Gaon mentions this also, the Ibn Ezra quotes him, that the people who did the golden calf, we were only trying to hunt out the people who were doing Averot. You find there are many such things in the world. People will do things in order to find out who else jumped in the bandwagon. There are. They had in the news recently a whole website that was dedicated to people cheating on their spouses. That was built only to find out who was cheating on their spouses. An incredible thing. I mean, whatever idiot signed up and their names and but I heard there were imams and priests and all that. I'm sure there were rabbis. I don't know who was there. But this whole concept, it exists. So they were saying, listen, we were not the ones doing the Avirah. We were just trying to catch them. They have a word for it, entrapment. It's like a sting operation. Very good. We were setting up a golden calf, and let's see who worships it, and then we're going to kill them. Okay, this is Rav Saadia Gaon's opinion, and the Kuzari seems to be of the same one. They were nevertheless faulted for participating since they caused the rebellion to escalate from the plane of thought to physical action. Meaning, they were responsible because until you came along, nobody did anything wrong. They were just thinking about it. You were the reason, for whatever reason, you had. Again, the end does not justify the means. This is another case in Judaism where it doesn't help. It doesn't help that you had good intentions, even if you would consider those intentions good. It doesn't help. You did something wrong along the way.
And it's also
right? Do not put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. It's interesting. This sin was not a departure from worshipping the God who took them out of Egypt. Again, he keeps saying the sentence. They're not doing this to rebel against Hashem. Rather, it was a revolt against a fraction of His commandments. Namely, don't make a... For us, making an idol is synonymous with leaving Hashem. Yeah. For them, making an idol was just, okay, we know Hashem doesn't let, but that's the only way we know how to pray to Him. They were doing it almost for Hashem. For Hashem had commanded them not to make images representing Him, and they proceeded to make an image. They should have continued waiting instead of relying on their own intellects and making something to concentrate upon and follow. Nor should they have built an altar and offered sacrifices on it. They were motivated by the seers and astrologers among them, so there are always people among them, who thought that their actions were based on logic and were therefore highly accurate. But in reality, they were like the fool we mentioned above, who entered the office of the doctor and ended up killing people who normally would have been healed by those very same medicines. Remember that story? This idea is that you might think, someone tells me, Rabbi, I want to connect to Hashem, so I can't use the Siddur. For me, it's much better to go to a mountaintop and close my eyes and chant yoga hymns. Great, I'm glad that connects you to Hashem, but at the end of the day, this is how Hashem told us to connect to Him. So you are the one who goes to the doctor's office prescribing medications on your own without knowing what Hashem says, this is what works. So how do we make the Siddur more meaningful? Okay, we can work on that. How do we make Tefillah more interesting? We can work on that. But at the end of the day, the only way to connect to Hashem is on His terms, not on our logical terms. Nevertheless, the nation's intention was not to depart from serving Hashem. Again, on the contrary, they believed that they were refining their worship of Him. This is why they came to Aaron and revealed their desire to Him, and this is why he agreed to help them. Meaning, Aaron finds himself in a situation where he's like an outreach rabbi. If this is what they need to connect to Hashem, I'll let them do it. There are many such people. So Aaron was if he would think that they were doing this to fight Hashem, he wouldn't let them. Rather, he was saying, okay, let them break a mitzvah. The bigger picture is more important.
Wasn't just trying to bide his time for Moshe would come back.
According to one interpreter, the Kuzari has I respect Aaron much more here than trying to buy time. Here he said, I'm going to work with the people. This is who I have. The Pasuk says, Dor v'dor. Every generation has its own style. He was still guilty, though, for transforming their thoughts of rebellion into reality. So even though he had good intentions, he was an accomplice. The reason the sin seems so great in our eyes is because nowadays most nations do not worship images. In those times, however, people were very susceptible because all nations made images for worship. Had their sin been confined to the building of an edifice for their own design, for worshipping and focusing on Hashem, for offering sacrifices and otherwise for honoring Him, we would not consider it a terrible crime. What if the Jewish people had built inside of the desert a beautiful Bet Knesset? Who says that building a beautiful building for Hashem is not idol worship? Hashem needs your building. And there's one place that's holier than another place. We have accepted the concept of a place to pray, but everyone around us has a place to pray.
After Beit Mikdash was destroyed,
even when the Beit Mikdash was around, we had synagogues.
we had Beit Midrash.
Even a Bet Knesset. Where did they pray? Not in the Beit Mikdash. They prayed in synagogues. That's why it was called the Mikdash Me'at. You're right. So they were modeling themselves after what was in Yerushalayim. I'm not saying it was evil to have a Bet Knesset, but this concept of having a room that is holier than other places, we accept. So why can't we accept that they lived in a world where having an object that was holier than other objects was okay? They were wrong. It was an idol worship. But at least understand where they're coming from and why it wasn't considered such a terrible crime. Now, you're going to have to ask later a question. According to Rabbi Yonatan Halevy, why are we still then so afraid of bringing up the golden calf? If it wasn't such a big deal, why do we spend every high holiday service asking for Hashem to forget about the golden calf? We keep saying it to Hashem, please don't remind us. If Rabbi Yonatan Halevy is right, then we have a lot of other questions to answer. He's answering one question, but opening up a whole other can of worms. Very quickly, that is because today we do build edifices of our own, and we exalt these buildings and draw blessings from them. We might even suggest the divine presence hovers over these places, and the angels congregate around them, and were it not for the fact that we need to come together for prayer, this concept would seem foreign. And so it was during the reign of kings in Israel that the leaders protested against religionists who made temples for worship called bamot. We fought them very hard. The righteous kings of the time used to destroy them in order to prevent anyone from exalting any building except for the temple that Hashem had chosen and designed. By contrast, the kuvim above the ark were not a foreign concept to them, since Hashem had commanded their construction. So he's saying the difference between the altar and the temple and the bamot that people were building in their backyards, those Hashem had not warranted.
No,
but
he told them
not to do it.
Once they had the Beit Mikdash.
Very good. But the Beit Mikdash, that was Hashem said. So there's the same thing. I'm just building a miniature Beit Mikdash. But this was exactly the problem. The last paragraph. Despite this, those who worshipped the golden calf were punished and executed. Meaning, in spite of all this, Rabbi Yonatan says it was still a big deal. The number executed was only around 3,000 out of 600,000 adult males. During this whole Debacle, that's a word.
Debacle.
Debacle. The sustaining man never stopped falling, nor did the protective clouds dissipate, nor did the pillar of fire stop leading the way. Prophecy still abounded and even increased during this time. They were deprived of nothing that had been given to them except for the original 2 tablets Moshe broke. He later prayed to have another set of tablets given to them, and this wish was fulfilled. Their sin was pardoned. The point of Rabbi Yonatan Halevy in the last paragraph is what you said in the beginning. You obviously see that Hashem didn't stop choosing them.
Right.
In spite of this, He took care of those who were involved, but the rest of the people got right back on track. And this is the Kuzari's answer. The Kuzari could have just said this last paragraph. It was just 3,000 people, and the rest of us are okay. But he didn't.
But he explained
He chose even to explain for those chotim, those sinners, why it is that they did what they did on a logical level. And perhaps this is a classic lesson of how to judge other people favorably. In general, we say, oh, those evil people, those reform people, those conservative, those chilonim in Israel, those whatever people we decide we don't like for that day. The truth is, maybe you can judge them favorably. You don't agree with them, they're going to have an averah for violating Hashem's Torah. But instead of hating them, maybe they saw the problems that we see in the Orthodox Jewish community, they just couldn't stay there. So they had to get up and leave. Maybe it was us who got them to run away. Or maybe they're doing things that are not so crazy. In the world, men and women sitting together to pray is not a crazy thing. For us, we still have this purity of Bet Knesset. For us, it's a big deal. But for them, maybe it's not such a big deal. And so we're not telling you that they're okay. We're saying that Rabbi Yonatan Halevy, even about those who worship the golden calf, was able to rationalize for them, to justify their actions by putting it into context. And we should have the same ability to judge other people favorably.